continue as be well positioned to come out. So when I talk to you about that we're well positioned to come out of the recession, small business is a huge part of our success there, but so is our history, right? We didn't get to this place by chance. Very strategically, people made investments in our community and our region that made a difference for who we are today. I'm going to remind you of a few of those investments. 20 years ago, we approved a scientific and cultural facilities district. It remains the only district of its size for cultural facilities in the country. It makes us actually very competitive for companies who are interested in coming here because of that amenity and how they see its value. We invested in fast tracks, and yes, I am well aware, I'm not supposed to say it right, but I am well aware of the challenges we have around fast tracks. And it's not there. It continues to be, though, the largest investment in a one-time transit system in the history of our country. It continues to attract hugely companies, even if they're not going to locate around the rail system itself, to this region and to this state. We have a huge challenge in figuring out what are we going to do to go forward, given that we can't build the system we all thought we could in 2004. We approved Referendum C. This was a timeout, a Tabor timeout for the state. It was important at one time. It no longer is important today because nobody's hitting their revenue limits in the public sector. But it's an example of when you take an approval of something like that, that funding went primarily toward roads and being able to reinforce our transportation system and help to position us in a good place today. We built sports facilities, and that also gives us a lot of national prominence and is a great marketing tool. And we've marketed the heck out of our natural resources. Our mountains, our outdoor activities, and our 300 days of sunshine and tourism continues to be a very strong place for us in the country. So it wasn't by accident that we're at where we're at today. And the great challenge we face right now at the Chamber is every decision we make, whether it's around economic development or it's around state public policy, is how do we grow jobs? Because no matter how many economists tell us we are technically out of a recession, no one believes it until your neighbor or you are employed again. And that's what everyone's waiting for. And so our focus has been around jobs. Right now at the legislature, it is a huge struggle in terms of trying to balance our state budget. The deficit is $940 million, and that's only the latest deficit. If you added all of it together, the gap that has been closed has been over $2 billion. Huge challenge. The thing I would tell you is this. There is no question in my mind that every elected official dealing with that is taking it seriously, that they are listening, and that we are sharing information about how we think you can best do it. And while there is disagreement about that, what I think is most important in this conversation is that we don't default to the place that is so easy to go, and that's a place where you try to find a bad guy, someone to blame for the situation. The reality is we have a recession. It's extremely difficult. And while it's easy for business to be in the place that you want to blame or point a finger at, I don't believe it's that simple. And as I've reflected on it and actually talked with a number of legislators about it, one of the things that struck me is when you think about where we are all employed, unless we work in the public sector, we are employed by business. Whether you're mission-driven, community-driven, nonprofits included, whether you have to make a profit to try to return to your investors, or you are a foundation even, those are all organizations that belong to the Chamber and are part of the business community. As a matter of fact, when you look in the mirror at yourself, most of you probably are part of that business community. The community that will come together to solve the challenges we face. It will be where the job growth is as we come out of this recession. It will be in the private sector. It will be nonprofits and for-profits that will grow us out of this. And what's most important is that we continue to keep our eye on that goal and not on pointing fingers or diminishing everybody who I believe is working so hard to try to solve the challenges we currently face. And so hopefully I've given you something to think about, but more importantly that you could, if we can take a few minutes for questions, challenge me or share your views, or I can answer more questions about what we're trying to do at the Chamber and how we work. Sound good? I got a head nod, so this is question time. Questions for me? Go ahead. Sure. The question is, what would we like legislators to do with the budget? The primary focus right now for the business community has been the closing of the gap has been around removing incentives and credits. These exemptions and incentives are often used to try to grow jobs or business. There were 13 of them that have been proposed to be removed, and that has been the primary focus of the last 28 days. I'm not counting, but 28 days that we've been in session. We identified 3 of those incentives and exemptions that we believe are critical to job growth of the 13. And those 3 had to do with net operating loss, allowing businesses, particularly as they're starting to come out of a loss, not to have to increase their taxes, and we worry impact in the number of employees they're able to hire. There is an energy exemption that we're very worried could have a negative impact on energy in the state. And then the third one was enterprise zones. And this one allows in zones that have been created around the state as an enterprise that those companies that are there and qualify could take an exemption. And those have been the 3 we focused on. It appears at this point those 3 will all continue to go forward. Sure. Talking about the question had to do with where is the chamber at in terms of funding of higher education. Currently, how higher ed has been backfilled is through the federal stimulus money. And so until the year 2012, higher ed must not have reductions made that take them lower than their budgeted amount from 2005. So that's kind of an agreement that the state has made with the federal government and can't be changed. Right now I'm serving on a committee that is chaired by 2 men who are trying to organize around what can we do as we look long term in terms of higher ed funding. There's no question in the business community higher education is critically important to us, especially because we're a knowledge-based environment where we are trying to grow our economy really is a knowledge base. But the thing I would mention to you as well is I think we have to look at education as a full continuum. It is not higher ed versus K-12, and we have to start to talk about it as a continuum, because if we drop kids, 32% of them never graduate from high school, the cost of that is tremendous to us as well. And so figuring out what we do with higher ed, very supportive. Figuring out what the solutions are, very supportive. We have our sleeves rolled up and we'll be working on it. I don't have the answers today, but I think it's a combination of reform along with funding issues is what we're probably going to see. We're worse than in the lower half. We're 50 out of 50 in terms of funding higher education right now. So, go ahead. The question had to do with insurance reform. How close do we align with the U.S. Chamber, and what's our position on it as the local chamber? The U.S. Chamber, while it's very informative and helps us, especially with details and facts on issues, doesn't always mean we align. The local chamber has a very specific process we go through to make decisions about what we support and don't support. We have a paper with 5 principles that guide our position on health care. Number 1 principle is we have to get the cost curve under control. And we have heard it consistently from employers, employees, all sizes. It's the cost curve that's killing us. And so our focus on the federal legislation has been around, if we believe it's going to affect the cost curve, then it's going to be something we could be supportive of. And until we do, that's the issue that our employers are telling us is most important to them. So that will guide our decision. And right now, there isn't anything I think that everybody feels very confident is fully addressing that issue.